My wife slept with a bartender while I was vomiting alone in our hotel room, then spent the next 2 decades kissing me goodnight like nothing happened. When I finally confronted her, she cried and said, "I've thought about that night every day since, but I convinced myself telling you would only hurt you." I stayed silent. That was last week. This morning, she was still sitting in her car outside our driveway, holding the diary like it might burn her. There were countless moments through all of this where I felt like I was being too paranoid, and it turns my stomach to know that I had actually been correct. I'm a 50-year-old guy, and I've been together with my wife for nearly 20 years at this point. We met back in high school as teenagers, and I have never been interested in any other woman in my entire life. My wife is stunningly beautiful, and she was an amazing mother to our children. She is incredibly charismatic and lights up any room that she walks into. She's also the type of person who makes friends wherever she goes, and she has aged like fine wine. Even though learning the truth about her has ripped my heart in two, I don't know if I have the courage to leave her after all these years. When we were younger, we both had a strong interest in traveling, so we made it a priority to travel to as many countries as we could afford. We ended up visiting almost 30 countries together and racking up years of wild, unique memories. After we had explored the world together, we decided to settle down and have kids, and ever since then, our life has been pretty quiet, or so I thought. The other day, I was rummaging around in the garage looking for an old tool I had misplaced when I accidentally knocked over a random, overstuffed box. When I was putting the box back together, I found a small pink diary with a broken lock on it. All of our children are grown, and our only daughter is turning 20 years old. I thought the diary might have belonged to her when she was a child, so I started reading it with the intention to only read a couple of pages to relive old memories. I know that my choice to read the diary might be a little controversial, but I thought it was from when she was around 8 years old. I just wanted to see if there were any wholesome childhood memories that I had forgotten about. I miss my daughter and all my grown kids so much these days, and sometimes I feel desperate for any reminders of their childhood since it was such a special time in our family. Well, did I get way more than I bargained for? It only took a couple of pages for me to realize that the diary had in fact belonged to my wife. This is when I probably screwed up. Maybe I should have put the diary away as soon as I realized it was my wife's, but I guess curiosity just got the best of me. I kept reading more and more pages of the diary, and I realized she had been keeping it during the time when we were still traveling the world, meaning that my wife was about 23 and I was 24 at the time. I hadn't run into any surprises until she started writing about us arriving in Italy. I thought back to the trip. I remember it being one of our worst from my perspective, because I got food poisoning from a crappy cheap restaurant a couple days in. I ended up being bedridden with nausea for 2 days straight during our vacation, and I was feeling so frustrated that I couldn't go out and explore with my wife. But of course, I didn't want to ruin her vacation as well, and I encouraged her to go out and have a good time without me, just to remember to be safe and keep her phone on her. Based on what she told me, she had met some other tourists and went bar hopping with them one of the nights. It sounded like a good time, but I was literally in the middle of throwing up as she was telling me about the night, so I wasn't fully paying attention. I guess I should have, because in the next couple of pages of the diary, my wife started going into the details about how she had ended up sleeping with some rich Italian local that they had met at one of the bars. My heart sank as soon as I read the lines, and I started to hope that this was some sort of fictional, creative writing exercise instead of my wife's true life events. She talked about the SX in detail, as well as the guilt she felt afterwards. In the diary, she explained that she had decided not to tell me since I was in such a weak state, and she didn't want to ruin my vacation any further. To my wife's credit, she goes on for pages and pages about how guilty she felt about her mistake and how much she regretted it. But honestly, the damage had been done for me, and I spent the rest of the day just lying down and staring at the wall, thinking about how I had been lied to for literally 20 years. I knew that my wife and I had to have an uncomfortable conversation, and there was no way I couldn't confront her about all this. But again, she's the woman I love, the mother of my children, and leaving her over this would be the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and I just don't know if I have the strength. I needed to get out of the house. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and every family photo on the mantel seemed to mock me with its false happiness. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, telling myself I was just going for a drive to clear my head. My hands shook as I turned the ignition, and I had to grip the steering wheel tight to keep them steady. The familiar streets of our neighborhood blurred past as I drove without any real destination. 20 years. 20 years of marriage, of building a life together, of raising our children, and all of it built on a lie. I pulled into the parking lot of a small park where Elena and I used to take the kids when they were young. The playground equipment looked smaller than I remembered, worn down by years of use. I sat on one of the benches, the same bench where Elena and I had watched our daughter take her first steps on the grass. The memory hit me like a physical blow. How many other memories were tainted now? Every romantic dinner, every anniversary celebration, every time she told me she loved me. Was it all just guilt? Was she thinking about that Italian man when she kissed me goodnight? My phone buzzed in my pocket. Elena was texting, asking if I wanted her to save dinner for me. Such a normal, everyday message from a wife to her husband. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What could I possibly say? No thanks. I'm too busy processing your decades-old betrayal. I shoved the phone back in my pocket without responding. The sun was starting to set when I finally drove back home. Elena's car was in the driveway, and I could see the warm glow of lights through the windows. For a moment, I just sat there in my car, watching the house that had been our sanctuary for so many years. Through the kitchen window, I could see Elena moving around, probably cleaning up after dinner. She looked the same as she did this morning, the same as she did yesterday, but everything had changed. I forced myself to get out of the car and walk to the front door. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. Once I walked through that door, I would have to face her, have to pretend everything was normal while this knowledge ate away at me from the inside. But I couldn't sit in the driveway forever. Elena looked up with a smile when I entered the kitchen. There you are. I was starting to worry. I made that pasta dish you like. There's a plate in the fridge if you're hungry. Her voice was so normal, so caring. This was the woman who had nursed me through the flu last winter, who had cried with joy at our son's graduation, who still held my hand when we walked through the mall. But she was also the woman who had slept with another man while I lay sick in a hotel room, trusting her completely. I'm not hungry, I managed to say, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Elena's brow furrowed with concern. She walked over and placed her hand on my forehead, checking for fever. The gesture was so tender, so automatic after years of marriage. Are you feeling okay? You look pale. I pulled away from her touch, unable to bear it. I'm fine, just tired. I think I'll go to bed early. The hurt that flashed across her face made my chest tighten. She nodded slowly. Okay, let me know if you need anything. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, each step feeling like a mountain. The bed we had shared for so many years suddenly seemed foreign to me. I lay down on top of the covers, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words from her diary, her detailed description of that night in Italy. Around midnight, Elena came to bed. She moved quietly, trying not to wake me, though she must have known I wasn't really asleep. She slipped under the covers on her side of the bed, maintaining the careful distance that had grown between us over the years. When had that started? Was it guilt that made her pull away, or just the natural evolution of a long marriage? The next morning came too soon. Elena was already up, and I could smell coffee brewing downstairs. I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower, letting the hot water run over me until it turned cold. I had to go to work, had to pretend everything was normal, had to function like my world hadn't just imploded. Elena had left my coffee on the counter, prepared exactly how I liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. She knew me so well, or at least, I thought she did. I thought I knew her too. Work was torture. I sat through meetings without hearing a word, stared at spreadsheets without seeing the numbers. My colleague Robert asked if I was feeling all right, said I looked like I hadn't slept. I mumbled something about allergies and turned back to my computer screen. During lunch, I found myself Googling things I never thought I would. How to forgive infidelity, marriage after cheating, should you divorce over old affairs? The search results were overwhelming, filled with advice that seemed both too simple and impossibly complex. Some articles said that old affairs didn't matter if the cheater had been faithful since. Others said that the lying was worse than the cheating itself. None of them could tell me what to do with this crushing weight in my chest. I left work early, telling my boss I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie. I drove aimlessly again, this time ending up at the beach where Elena and I had gotten engaged. The waves crashed against the shore with the same rhythm they always had, indifferent to my personal catastrophe. A young couple walked by holding hands, and I wanted to warn them. I wanted to tell them that love wasn't enough, that trust could be shattered by secrets buried in pink diaries with broken locks. When I got home, our daughter's car was in the driveway. Catherine was visiting from college, something that usually filled me with joy. But now, even seeing her felt painful. She looked so much like Elena, the same dark hair, the same bright smile. She was almost the same age Elena had been when I couldn't even finish the thought. "Dad!" Catherine called out when I walked in. "Mom said you weren't feeling well. I brought you some of that soup from the place you like." She hugged me tight, and I had to fight not to break down. This beautiful, kind young woman was part of the life Elena and I had built together. How could I tear that apart? But how could I pretend everything was fine? "Thanks, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick. "That's really thoughtful." Elena appeared in the doorway, watching us with a soft smile. For a moment, I saw her as she was, not the 23-year-old who had betrayed me, but the 49-year-old woman who had been my partner for 2 decades. The woman who had held my hand through my father's funeral, who had cheered the loudest at every school play, who still left me little notes in my lunch bag. "Catherine was telling me about her new internship," Elena said. "It sounds like an amazing opportunity." We sat at the dinner table, the 3 of us, and Catherine chattered about her classes and her roommate and the boy she was dating. Elena and I played our parts, asking the right questions, making the right comments, but I could feel Elena watching me, sensing that something was wrong. We had been together too long for me to hide it completely. After Catherine left, promising to visit again next weekend, Elena and I were alone. She started clearing the dishes, and I found myself helping automatically. We moved around each other in the kitchen with the practiced choreography of a long marriage, not needing words to coordinate our movements. "Jimmy," Elena said finally, her voice quiet. "What's wrong? And please don't say nothing. I know you better than that." I froze, a plate in my hand. This was it. The moment where I could tell her everything, could finally release this burden that was crushing me. But looking at her face, at the genuine concern in her eyes, the words stuck in my throat. I've been thinking about the past lately," I said carefully. "About when we were young, All those trips we took. Something flickered in Elena's expression. Was it guilt? Fear? Or was I just seeing what I expected to see now? Those were good times, she said softly, though not all of them. Remember when you got so sick in Italy? That was awful. My heart pounded. She had brought it up herself. Yeah, I said, my mouth dry. That was a tough trip. Elena nodded, turning back to the dishes. I felt so bad for you. Food poisoning is the worst, and you were so sweet, insisting I still go out and enjoy the city. I watched her hands as she washed the dishes, the wedding ring I had placed on her finger glinting under the kitchen lights. Those same hands had touched another man. Those same hands had written about it in painful detail, in a diary she thought I would never find. Did you? I asked, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Enjoy the city? Elena glanced at me, a small frown on her face. Of course. I mean, I wished you could have been there with me, but I tried to make the best of it. Why? The lie came so easily to her. Or was it a lie? Maybe in her mind, she had rewritten history, buried that night so deep that she could speak about it without flinching. Maybe that's how she had lived with it all these years. No reason, I said, turning away. I'm going to go read for a bit. I retreated to my study, closing the door behind me. The diary was hidden in my desk drawer, wrapped in an old newspaper. I pulled it out and stared at it, this small pink book that had destroyed everything. Part of me wanted to read it again, to torture myself with the details. Another part wanted to burn it, to pretend I had never found it, but I knew that wouldn't work. The knowledge was in me now, poisoning everything. Every time Elena smiled at me, I would wonder if she was thinking about her secret. Every time we made love, I would wonder if she compared me to him. Every anniversary we celebrated would be tainted by the knowledge that she had broken our vows before we even made them official. The truly twisted part was that I still loved her. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies, I loved the woman who had been my wife for 20 years. I loved the mother of my children, the woman who sang in the shower, who couldn't sleep without her feet sticking out from under the covers, who cried at every Pixar movie. But could I live with this? Could I look at her every day knowing what I knew? Could I pretend that our marriage was what I had always believed it to be? Or would this knowledge eat away at me until there was nothing left but resentment and bitterness? I thought about our children, not just Catherine, but our 2 sons as well. They idolized their mother, and rightfully so. She had been amazing with them, patient and loving and endlessly supportive. How could I destroy their image of her? How could I tear apart their family over something that happened before they were even born? But then I thought about the trust between Elena and me, the foundation of our marriage. She had looked me in the eye countless times and never told me the truth. She had let me believe that I was the only man she had ever been with during our relationship. She had taken that choice away from me, the choice to forgive her, to work through it together when we were young and had less to lose. A soft knock on the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Jimmy? Elena's voice was hesitant. I'm going to bed. Are you coming? In a bit, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. I heard her footsteps retreat down the hall. In a bit. I would have to go to our bedroom, slip into bed beside her, and pretend that everything was normal. Tomorrow, I would have to wake up and do it all again. And the day after that, and the day after that. Unless I didn't. Unless I finally confronted her with what I knew. But then what? Would she deny it? Would she cry and beg for forgiveness? Would she try to explain it away as a youthful mistake? And would any of that change anything? I opened the diary one more time, flipping to the pages after Italy. Elena had written about feeling sick with guilt, about how she could barely look at me. But then, gradually, the entries returned to normal. She wrote about our other adventures, about her love for me, about her dreams for our future. The guilt faded into the background, mentioned less and less until it disappeared entirely. Maybe that's what I needed to do. Maybe I needed to let this fade, to push it down until it became just another secret in the complex tapestry of a long marriage. Every couple had secrets, didn't they? Things they chose not to share, moments they weren't proud of. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. This wasn't just any secret. This was a betrayal that struck at the very heart of who I thought we were as a couple. And now that I knew, I couldn't unknow it. I closed the diary and put it back in the drawer. Tomorrow, I would have to make a decision. Tomorrow, I would have to choose between the life I had built and the truth I had discovered. But tonight, I just sat in my study, surrounded by books and family photos, mourning the marriage I thought I had. The next morning arrived with the harsh reality that nothing had changed except my knowledge. I forced myself through the motions of getting ready, each mundane task feeling surreal. Elena had already left for her morning yoga class, a routine she'd maintained for the past 5 years. The house felt different without her presence, both a relief and an ache. I called in sick to work again. My boss expressed concern, suggesting I take a few days if needed. I agreed, knowing I couldn't focus on spreadsheets and client meetings while my marriage crumbled from within. The freedom of an empty day stretched before me, but instead of relief, I felt untethered. The diary still sat in my desk drawer, wrapped in newspaper like evidence of a crime. I found myself returning to it, not to reread the painful passages, but to examine the dates more carefully. The Italy trip had been in September 2004. I cross-referenced it with our photo albums. Finding the pictures Elena had taken during those days, I was sick. She looked radiant in them, smiling at tourist attractions, her hair windblown at the Colosseum. Now I wondered if that glow was from her secret encounter rather than the Roman sunshine. My phone rang, startling me from my detective work. It was my brother James, calling to confirm plans for our mother's birthday next month. We chatted briefly about gift ideas and restaurant reservations, the normalcy of the conversation highlighting how abnormal my life had become. When he asked about Elena, I managed to keep my voice steady, saying she was fine. The lie felt heavy on my tongue, After hanging up, I realized I needed to move, to do something physical before I went insane. I changed into workout clothes and headed to the garage, where my old punching bag hung in the corner. I hadn't used it in years, but suddenly the need to hit something overwhelmed me. The first punch sent shockwaves through my untrained arms, but I kept going, each strike fueled by 20 years of deception. I lost track of time, pounding the bag until my knuckles were raw and my shirt soaked with sweat. The physical pain felt good, real in a way that everything else didn't. When I finally stopped, breathing hard, I noticed Elena's car pulling into the driveway. Panic seized me. I wasn't ready to face her, not with sweat and anger still coursing through me. I ducked into the house through the side door, rushing upstairs to shower before she came inside. The hot water stung my damaged hands, but I welcomed the pain. By the time I emerged, dressed in fresh clothes, I could hear Elena moving around downstairs. The smell of coffee drifted up, along with the sound of her humming, a habit she'd had since I'd known her. I descended the stairs slowly, each step a choice to continue this charade. Elena looked up from the kitchen counter where she was preparing lunch, her face brightening at the sight of me. She wore her yoga clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger. For a moment, I saw the 23-year-old who had captivated me all those years ago, and my heart clenched. "Feeling better today?" she asked, sliding a sandwich across the counter toward me. Turkey and Swiss with mustard, no mayo, exactly how I liked it. "A bit," I lied, accepting the plate. My damaged knuckles throbbed as I picked up the sandwich, but I kept my hand steady. Elena studied me with those dark eyes that had always seen too much. "You've been so distant lately. Is it work? Is something happening with the Reynolds account?" The Reynolds account. Such a normal concern, such a typical worried wife question. I shook my head, taking a bite of sandwich to avoid answering immediately. The food tasted like cardboard, but I forced myself to chew and swallow. "Works fine," I finally said, "just processing some things." She moved around the counter, coming to stand beside me. Her hand reached for mine, and I had to force myself not to pull away. Her fingers traced the redness on my knuckles, her touch gentle. "You've been hitting the bag," she observed. It wasn't a question. "You haven't done that since your dad died." The comparison hit me like a physical blow. I had pounded that bag for hours after we lost my father, working through grief and anger at the unfairness of losing him so young. Now I was grieving again, but for something different, the death of the marriage I thought I had. "Yeah, well," I muttered, extracting my hand from hers. Needed to blow off some steam. Elena's face showed hurt at my withdrawal, but she didn't push. Instead, she returned to her side of the counter, busying herself with cleaning up the lunch preparations. The silence between us felt heavy, loaded with all the things I couldn't say. "I ran into Sarah Samuels at yoga," she said, her voice artificially bright. "She mentioned they're organizing a couple's dinner next month. I told her we'd probably be interested." A couple's dinner. The thought of sitting around a table with other married pairs, pretending everything was perfect, made me feel sick, but I nodded, playing my part. "Sure, sounds good." Elena's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. "Oh, that's the dentist's office. I need to reschedule my cleaning." She picked up the phone, walking into the living room to take the call. I watched her go, noting the easy sway of her hips, the confidence in her stride. How many secrets did that body hold? How many other moments had she hidden from me over the years? The Italy incident was documented, but what if there were others? What if our entire marriage was built on a foundation of lies I hadn't even discovered yet? The thought sent me spiraling. I abandoned my half-eaten sandwich and retreated to the garage again, this time to actually look for the tool I'd claimed to be searching for days ago. Physical activity seemed to be the only thing that quieted my racing mind. I organized shelves, sorted through boxes of old camping equipment, anything to keep my hands busy. In one box, I found our old travel journals. Not Elena's secret diary, but the shared journal we'd kept during our trips. We'd taken turns writing entries, documenting our adventures together. I flipped through pages covered in both our handwriting, reading snippets of our younger selves. Elena's entry from Paris, gushing about the Eiffel Tower at sunset. My description of the street food in Bangkok. Our joint entry from the Great Wall of China, where we'd gotten engaged. Then I found the Italy section. My entries stopped abruptly when I got sick, but Elena's continued. I read her words with new eyes, looking for hints of deception. Her entry from the night it happened was brief. "Jimmy still sick. Went out with some Americans I met at the hotel. Saw some beautiful churches lit up at night. Wish M could have been there." No mention of bars, no mention of the Italian man, just a careful omission, a sanitized version of events. I wondered if she'd written it, knowing I might read it someday, crafting her alibi even then. The calculating nature of it made my stomach turn. "Find what you were looking for?" Elena's voice from the garage doorway made me jump. I closed the journal quickly, feeling like a child caught snooping, which, in a way, I was. "Just got distracted by these old journals," I said, holding up the book. "Remember these?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course, we were so young then, so eager to document everything. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Sometimes I think it's better to live in the moment, rather than constantly recording it." Was that a warning? A subtle acknowledgement that some things were better left undocumented, unexamined? I couldn't tell anymore. Every word she spoke seemed loaded with potential double meanings. "Maybe," I said, placing the journal back in the box. "But it's nice to have the memories." "The real memories are in here," Elena said, tapping her temple. "And here." She placed her hand over her heart. I wondered which memories she kept there. Our wedding day, the birth of our children, or the night she spent with another man while I lay trusting and vulnerable in a Roman hotel room. The rest of the day passed in this strange dance of normalcy and subtext. We moved around each other carefully, Elena clearly sensing my distance but unsure of its source. She suggested watching a movie after dinner, something we used to do regularly, but had fallen out of the habit. I agreed, desperate for any distraction from my thoughts. We settled on the couch, Elena curling into her usual spot while I sat rigidly on my end. She'd chosen a romantic comedy, something light and forgettable, but every scene of the couple on screen falling in love felt like mockery. When they reached their inevitable happy ending, I felt nothing but bitterness. Hollywood lies, selling the fantasy that love conquered all, that trust once given could never be truly broken. I'm tired, I announced as soon as the credits rolled. Think I'll head up. Elena looked disappointed but nodded. I'll be up soon. Just want to finish folding this laundry. In our bedroom, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling and counting the minutes until she joined me. 23 minutes. She slipped in quietly, the mattress dipping under her weight. The familiar scent of her lavender hand cream drifted over, a smell that used to comfort me, but now felt like another layer of deception. Did she wear the same scent that night in Italy? Sleep eluded me again. I listened to Elena's breathing deepen and slow, envying her ability to rest peacefully while I lay tormented. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and went downstairs. The house felt different in the darkness, shadows transforming familiar furniture into strange shapes. I made myself tea and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sky slowly lighten outside. That's where Elena found me hours later, still sitting with my cold tea. She paused in the doorway, wrapped in her robe, concern etched on her face. Jimmy, this has to stop, she said softly. Whatever's going on, we need to talk about it. You're scaring me. I looked at her, really looked at her. Even first thing in the morning, she was beautiful. Her hair was mussed from sleep, her face bare of makeup, but she still took my breath away. How was it possible to love someone so much and feel so betrayed by them at the same time? I know, I said finally. I need time to sort through some things. She moved into the kitchen, starting the coffee maker with practiced efficiency. Is it about us? Have I done something wrong? The question hung in the air between us. Such a simple question with such a complicated answer. Yes, you did something wrong, 20 years ago, but you've been the perfect wife since then. Does that matter? Does time heal betrayal, or does it just bury it deeper? No, I lied. It's not you. I'm just going through something. Elena poured 2 cups of coffee, doctoring mine the way I liked it before sliding it across to me. She sat down across the table, cradling her own mug. We've been married for 20 years, she said quietly. I know when you're lying to me. The irony of her words almost made me laugh. She knew when I was lying, but I hadn't known when she was. For 2 decades, I'd believed every word, trusted every smile, never questioning the foundation of our life together. Then you know I'm not ready to talk about it, I replied, my voice harder than intended. She flinched, but nodded. Okay, but I'm here when you are. Whatever it is, we can work through it together. We always have. Have we, though? I wanted to ask. Or have you been working through your guilt alone while I lived in blissful ignorance? Instead, I just nodded, sipping my perfectly prepared coffee and hating how good it tasted. The weekend brought a new challenge, our monthly dinner with Elena's parents. Usually, I enjoyed these gatherings. Elena's mother was an excellent cook, and her father and I bonded over our shared love of baseball, but the thought of sitting at their table, pretending everything was normal, felt overwhelming. We could cancel, Elena suggested, watching me dress with obvious reluctance. I could say you're not feeling well. No, I said, straightening my tie. They'll worry. Besides, your mom's been planning this meal all week. Elena stepped close, reaching up to adjust my collar. The gesture was so familiar, so wifely, that I had to close my eyes against the pain of it. When I opened them, she was looking at me with such tenderness that I almost broke down right there. I love you, she said simply. Whatever's happening, please remember that. I couldn't say it back. The words that had come so easily for 20 years now stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, stepping away from her touch. The drive to her parents' house was silent, except for the radio playing softly. Elena stared out the window, her hands folded in her lap. I gripped the steering wheel, focusing on the road and trying not to think about all the other family dinners we'd driven to over the years. Had she thought about her secret during those drives? Had guilt ever consumed her the way it was consuming me now? Elena's parents greeted us warmly, her mother enveloping me in a hug that smelled of garlic and rosemary. Her father clapped me on the back, already launching into discussion about the latest game. I responded automatically, falling into the familiar rhythm of family interaction. Dinner was torture disguised as normalcy. Elena's mother had made her famous lasagna, a recipe she'd taught Elena early in our marriage. I forced myself to eat, to compliment the food, to engage in conversation about work and the kids and plans for the holidays. All the while, I felt like a fraud, sitting at this table where I'd been welcomed as a son, knowing what I knew about their daughter. You're quiet tonight, Jimmy, Elena's mother observed, her sharp eyes studying me. Everything all right? Just tired, I said, the excuse becoming worn from overuse. Work's been demanding lately. She made sympathetic noises, but I could see she wasn't entirely convinced. Mothers always knew, didn't they? I wondered if she'd known about Italy, if Elena had confided in her all those years ago. The thought of everyone knowing but me made my skin crawl. After dinner, Elena's father pulled me aside to show me some new tools he'd bought for his workshop. I followed him to the garage, grateful for the escape from the women's knowing looks. We examined drill bits and sanders, discussing projects and repairs, man talk that required no emotional depth. You know, he said suddenly, not looking at me, marriage is hard, even the good ones. Hell, especially the good ones. I froze, wondering if Elena had said something to him, but he continued, still focused on organizing his toolbox. Elena's mother and I, we've had our rough patches, times when I wondered if we'd make it, but we stuck it out, worked through it. He finally looked at me, his eyes kind, but serious. Whatever's going on, son, remember that the life you've built together is worth fighting for. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He squeezed my shoulder, then turned back to his tools, giving me a moment to compose myself. The drive home was as silent as the drive there. Elena sat with her hands folded, occasionally sighing softly. When we pulled into our driveway, she finally spoke. My dad said something to you. It wasn't a question. I nodded, turning off the engine but making no move to get out of the car. He means well, she said softly. They both do. They love you like a son. I know, I managed. And I did know. That was part of what made this so hard. It wasn't just Elena I'd lose if I couldn't get past this. It was her family, who'd become my family. It was the entire life we'd woven together, thread by careful thread, over 2 decades. Inside the house, we moved through our nighttime routines like actors who'd performed the same play 1,000 times. Elena removed her jewelry, placing each piece in the wooden box I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. I hung up my clothes, checked that the doors were locked, turned off the lights downstairs. Normal married couple things, executed with mechanical precision. In bed, Elena turned to face me, her hand reaching across the space between us. Jimmy, please, talk to me. We've never gone this long without really talking. I looked at her hand, resting on the sheet between us. The wedding ring I'd placed there caught the moonlight from the window. Such a small circle of metal, representing such enormous promises. Do you ever think about the past? I asked, the question emerging without conscious thought. About things you did when you were young? Elena's hand stilled. Sometimes. Why? Do you have regrets? She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, everyone has regrets. Things they wish they'd done differently, but I try not to dwell on them. The past can't be changed, but it can be hidden, I said, the words sharper than intended. Elena pulled her hand back. What's that supposed to mean? I turned away, facing the wall. Nothing. Forget it. I'm just tired. I felt her watching me in the darkness, could practically hear her mind working, trying to understand what had changed. Part of me wanted her to figure it out, to realize what I'd discovered and confess everything. Another part hoped she never would, that we could somehow move forward without having to confront the truth. Eventually, her breathing evened out, but I knew she wasn't really asleep. We lay there, 2 people sharing a bed, but separated by 20 years of deception, each pretending for the other's sake. The next morning was Sunday, which meant church. We'd been attending the same congregation since Catherine was born, finding comfort in the ritual and community. But sitting in that pew, surrounded by other families, listening to a sermon about honesty and forgiveness, felt like cosmic mockery. Elena sat beside me, her hands folded in her lap, the picture of devotion. I wondered if she'd prayed for forgiveness after Italy, if she'd sat in churches during our travels, wrestling with her guilt while I recovered from food poisoning, oblivious to her betrayal. After the service, we were surrounded by friends, all wanting to chat and make plans. I smiled and nodded, shaking hands and accepting invitations I had no intention of keeping. Elena handled it better, her natural charisma smoothing over my awkwardness. She'd always been the social one, the one who made friends wherever we went, including in Italian bars apparently. That afternoon, our son Michael called from college. Elena put him on speaker, and we listened as he told us about his classes, his roommate drama, his plans for spring break. The normalcy of it, the easy family dynamic, felt both precious and painful. This was what I stood to lose, not just Elena, but these moments of connection with our children. After the call, Elena suggested we work in the garden together, something we'd done every Sunday in good weather for years. I agreed, desperate for any activity that might quiet my racing thoughts. We worked side by side, pulling weeds and planting new flowers, our movements coordinated from years of practice. Remember when we planted that rose bush? Elena asked, gesturing to a thriving plant near the fence. Catherine was so little, she wanted to help, but kept trying to eat the dirt. I did remember. Catherine in her tiny overalls, face smeared with soil, giggling as we tried to redirect her to safer activities. The memory was sweet and painful, another moment in the life we'd built on a foundation of lies. That was a good day, I said quietly. Elena looked at me, her eyes soft. We've had so many good days, Jimmy. So many. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. We continued working in silence, the sun warm on our backs, the earth cool beneath our hands. For a moment, I could almost pretend everything was normal, that we were just another middle-aged couple tending their garden on a Sunday afternoon. But then Elena stood to get more mulch, and I noticed the way she moved, still graceful after all these years. I thought about those hands touching another man, that body betraying our relationship, and the illusion shattered. That evening, Catherine called to say she was coming home the following weekend, bringing her boyfriend for us to meet. Elena was thrilled, immediately beginning to plan meals and fuss over the guest room. I watched her excitement, her maternal joy at the prospect of hosting our daughter and meeting this important person in her life, and felt my heart break a little more. How could someone who'd betrayed me be such a good mother? How could the woman who'd lied for 20 years be the same one who'd stayed up all night with sick children, who'd cheered at every soccer game and school play, who'd cried at every graduation? The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. That night, I found myself in my study again, the diary hidden in my desk drawer calling to me. I pulled it out, flipping past the painful pages about Italy to read the entries that came after. Elena had written about feeling sick with guilt, about how she could barely look at me. But then, gradually, the entries shifted. She wrote about our adventures in Greece, her excitement about our future, her growing certainty that I was the one she wanted to spend her life with. One entry, dated 2 weeks after Italy, caught my eye. M is finally feeling better. Seeing him smile again makes me realize how much I could have lost. I can't believe I risked everything for one stupid night. I love him so much it hurts. I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to him, even if he never knows what I'm making up for. I stared at those words, written in Elena's younger handwriting. She'd kept that promise, hadn't she? For 20 years, she'd been the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the loving partner. But did that make up for the betrayal? Could time and good behavior erase such a fundamental breach of trust? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Jimmy, it's late. Are you coming to bed? I quickly hid the diary, calling out, "In a minute." But I sat there for another hour, wrestling with questions that had no good answers. Tomorrow, I'd have to go back to work, pretend everything was normal. Next weekend, I'd have to meet Catherine's boyfriend, play the role of the protective but welcoming father. Life would continue to demand my participation, even as I fell apart inside. When I finally made it to bed, Elena was asleep, or pretending to be. I lay beside her, close enough to feel her warmth, but careful not to touch. The distance between us felt both necessary and unbearable. The next few days blurred together. I returned to work, throwing myself into projects with desperate intensity. My colleagues seemed relieved to have me back to normal, not realizing that my focus was just another form of avoidance. I stayed late at the office, claiming deadline pressure but really just delaying the moment when I'd have to go home and face Elena. She noticed, of course. She always noticed. But she didn't push, giving me the space I seemed to need while making sure I knew she was there when I was ready. Her patience, which I'd always admired, now felt like another form of deception. Was she patient because she loved me, or because she knew she had no right to demand answers after keeping such a massive secret? Wednesday night, I came home to find Elena in the living room with photo albums spread across the coffee table. She looked up when I entered, her face hopeful but cautious. "I was thinking about what you said," she explained, "about thinking about the past. I thought maybe we could look through these together, remember some good times." I stood frozen in the doorway, torn between fleeing and joining her. The photo albums contained our entire history, our wedding, our children's births, family vacations, holiday celebrations. 20 years of life documented in carefully organized pages. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said finally. Elena's face fell. She began gathering the albums, her movements sharp with hurt. "Right, of course. Sorry, I just thought." "Elena." Her name came out strangled. She stopped, looking at me with eyes that suddenly seemed to understand more than I'd revealed. "It's about Italy, isn't it?" The words hung between us like a physical presence. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. She knew. Somehow, she knew. Elena sank onto the couch, her face pale. "How did you find out?" I stared at Elena for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The photo albums lay scattered between us like evidence at a crime scene. My throat felt like sandpaper. "The diary," I finally managed. "I found your diary in the garage." Elena's hands flew to her mouth. She stood up abruptly, then sat back down, her legs apparently unable to support her. The color drained from her face until she looked almost gray. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, Jimmy, I don't." I held up my hand, stopping whatever explanation was about to spill out. "Just don't." I walked to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a scotch with shaking hands. The burn of alcohol did nothing to numb the pain, but at least it gave me something to focus on besides the sound of Elena's ragged breathing behind me. "How much did you read?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Enough." I turned to face her, gripping the glass like a lifeline. "I read about Italy, about him, about how you decided not to tell me because I was too sick to handle it." Elena flinched at each word like they were physical blows. Good. Let her feel a fraction of what I'd been feeling for days. "Jimmy, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" The words came out harsher than I intended. "How you slept with another man while I was trusting you? How you've lied to me every single day for 20 years? Which part would you like to explain?" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Part of me wanted to comfort her, the instinct so ingrained after 2 decades. The other part wanted her to hurt the way I was hurting. "It was one night," she said between sobs. "One stupid, horrible night that I've regretted every day since, but not enough to tell me about it. I wanted to. God, Jimmy, you have no idea how many times I almost told you. But then we got engaged, and then married, and then the kids came, and I couldn't destroy everything we'd built over one mistake." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So instead, you let me build my entire life on a lie." Elena stood up, taking a tentative step toward me. I backed away, and she stopped, fresh tears spilling over. "Our life isn't a lie," she said desperately. "Everything we've built together, our children, our home, our love, none of that is a lie. How can you say that? Our entire relationship is contaminated. Every memory, every moment. I don't know what's real anymore. What's real is that I love you. What's real is that I've been faithful to you every single day since that night. What's real is the family we've created together." I drained the rest of my scotch and set the glass down harder than necessary. "Were there others?" Elena's eyes widened. "What? No, Jimmy, no. It was just that one time, I swear." "Your word doesn't mean much to me right now." She crumpled at that, sinking back onto the couch. I watched her sob, feeling simultaneously satisfied and disgusted with myself. This wasn't who I wanted to be, but I didn't know how to be anything else in this moment. "I need to know everything," I heard myself say. "Every detail you left out of the diary." Elena looked up at me, mascara streaking her cheeks. Why? Why torture yourself with details? Because I've been torturing myself with my imagination for days. At least the truth is finite. She wiped her face with trembling hands. His name was Luca. He was a bartender at one of the places we went. The Americans I was with were flirting with his friends, and he started talking to me. I'd had too much wine. I was feeling lonely and guilty about having fun while you were sick, and I let him walk me back to his apartment. Each word was like a knife, but I forced myself to listen, to finally know the truth she'd hidden for so long. It was over in less than an hour. As soon as it happened, I knew I'd made the worst mistake of my life. I threw up in his bathroom, then ran back to our hotel. I sat outside our room for an hour, trying to work up the courage to wake you and tell you, but you were so sick, so vulnerable, and I was a coward. Yes, I agreed. You were. Elena nodded, accepting the judgment. I've thought about that night every day since. Every time you've told me you love me, every anniversary, every time we've made love, the guilt has been there. But I convinced myself that telling you would be selfish, that it would only hurt you to ease my conscience. How noble of you, I said sarcastically. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to explain. Jimmy, I was 23 years old. I was stupid and hammered, and I made a terrible decision. But that one night doesn't erase 20 years of loving you, of being faithful to you, of building a life with you. I moved to the window, staring out at our backyard. The rosebush Catherine had helped plant was blooming. The swing set we'd assembled together stood empty, our children long outgrown it. 20 years of memories spread out before me, all tainted now. I need you to leave, I said without turning around. What? I need you to pack a bag and go to your parents' house, or a hotel. I don't care. I just need you gone. Jimmy, please, I can't think with you here. I can't breathe. Every time I look at you, I see you with him. I need space to figure out what I want to do. I heard her stand up, heard her footsteps move toward the stairs, then pause. I love you, she said quietly. That's never been a lie. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I stood at the window, listening to her move around upstairs, packing. 20 minutes later, I heard her car start and pull out of the driveway. Only then did I allow myself to sink into a chair, my legs finally giving out. The house felt enormous without her in it. Every room held memories, ghosts of our life together. I wandered aimlessly, picking up objects and setting them down. Our wedding photo on the mantel, the ceramic bowl Catherine made in 3rd grade, Michael's first baseball trophy, 20 years of accumulated life. My phone rang. Elena's parents. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. This time, it was Catherine. I couldn't face her questions, couldn't lie to our daughter. I turned the phone off entirely. I slept on the couch that night, unable to face our bedroom. But sleep was fitful, filled with dreams where I was back in that Roman hotel room, sick and trusting, while Elena was somewhere in the city, betraying everything we had. The next morning, I called in sick to work again. My boss was understanding but concerned. I promised I'd be back soon, though I had no idea if that was true. How did people function after something like this? How did they go to meetings and deal with spreadsheets when their entire world had imploded? I spent the day in a strange fog, moving through the house like a ghost. I found myself in Catherine's old room, staring at the posters she'd left on the walls. In Michael's room, his sports trophies lined the shelves. In our youngest son, David's room, his college acceptance letter was still pinned to the bulletin board. 3 children who existed because Elena and I had stayed together. 3 lives that would be shattered if I couldn't find a way past this. That afternoon, James showed up at my door. I'd forgotten I'd given him a spare key years ago. Elena called me, he said without preamble. She's worried, said you kicked her out but wouldn't tell her parents why. It's none of your business, I said, trying to close the door. James stuck his foot in the way. You're my brother. Your marriage is falling apart. That makes it my business. I let him in because I didn't have the energy to fight. He followed me to the kitchen, where I poured myself another scotch despite it being barely past noon. You want to tell me what happened? He asked. She cheated on me. James's eyebrows shot up. Elena? When? With who? 20 years ago, in Italy. Some bartender named Luca. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. James was quiet for a long moment. Then, 20 years ago? And you just found out? I told him about the diary, about the discovery that had shattered everything. He listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head. That's rough, he said when I finished. I can't imagine. But Jimmy, 20 years. She's been faithful for 20 years since then? That doesn't erase what she did. No, it doesn't. But doesn't it count for something? I glared at him. Whose side are you on? Yours. Always yours. But being on your side doesn't mean enabling you to throw away your entire life over something that happened when you were kids. We weren't kids. We were engaged. You were 24. Your brain wasn't even fully developed. And yeah, what she did was wrong. The lying was wrong. But Jimmy, people make mistakes. What matters is what they do after. She lied to me. Every day for 20 years she lied. James sighed. Or she protected you from a truth that would have destroyed you both when you were young and had nothing. Now you have a family, a life, roots. Maybe the lie was wrong, but maybe it also gave you the chance to build something worth saving. I wanted to argue, but I was too exhausted. James stayed for another hour, making sure I ate something, then left with a promise to check on me tomorrow. That night, Catherine called again. This time I answered. Dad, what's going on? Mom's at Grandma's crying and won't tell anyone why. Did you guys have a fight? The concern in her voice broke my heart. It's complicated, sweetheart. I'm coming home. No, Catherine, you have classes. I don't care. My family is more important. I'll be there tomorrow. She hung up before I could protest further. Great. Now I'd have to face our daughter, look her in the eye and either lie or tell her the truth about her mother. Both options felt impossible. I pulled out the diary again that night, not to read the painful parts, but to read what came after. Elena's entries about feeling sick with guilt, about watching me recover and realizing how much she loved me, about deciding to be the best partner she could be to make up for her betrayal, even if I never knew. And she had been, hadn't she? For 20 years, she'd been an exemplary wife, supportive, faithful, loving. She'd raised our children with patience and grace. She'd held my hand through my father's death, through job losses and health scares. She'd been my anchor, but she'd also been my betrayer. The two truths existed simultaneously, impossible to reconcile. Catherine arrived the next afternoon, bursting through the door with the energy that always surrounded her. She hugged me tight, then pulled back to study my face. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "When's the last time you shaved? Or showered?" "Nice to see you too," I said, attempting a smile. She wasn't buying it. "Where's Mom?" "At your grandparents'." "Why?" I looked at my daughter, so like her mother in so many ways. The same dark hair, the same expressive eyes, the same ability to see right through me. "Your mother and I are going through something," I said carefully. "We need some space to figure things out." "Is this about another woman? Did you cheat on Mom?" "What? No, Catherine, I would never." "Then did she cheat on you?" The question hung in the air. I couldn't lie to my daughter, but I couldn't tell her the truth either. "It's complicated," I repeated. Catherine studied me for a long moment. "It's something from the past, isn't it? Something that happened before we were born?" Sometimes I forgot how perceptive she was. I nodded reluctantly. "And you just found out about it?" Another nod. Catherine sighed, sounding far older than her 20 years. "Dad, I don't know what happened, and maybe it's none of my business, but I know you and Mom. I've watched you my entire life. Whatever happened in the past, you two love each other. Real love. The kind most people never find. Don't throw that away over ancient history. It's not that simple. Love is never simple, but it's worth fighting for." When had my daughter become so wise? I hugged her again, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, the same brand she'd used since high school. "I'm going to see Mom," she announced. "Then I'm coming back here, and we're going to have a family meeting. All of us. Michael and David can video call in. Catherine, no arguments. This family is not falling apart on my watch." She left with the same whirlwind energy she'd arrived with. I sat in the sudden silence, wondering when I'd lost control of the situation. Or maybe I'd never had control. Maybe that was the illusion. 2 hours later, Catherine returned with Elena in tow. My wife, was she still my wife? Looked as bad as I felt. Her eyes were red and puffy, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd lost weight in just the few days we'd been apart. "Sit," Catherine commanded, pointing to the living room. "Both of you." We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us feeling like an ocean. Catherine set up her laptop, and soon Michael and David's faces appeared on the screen. My 3 children, the best things Elena and I had ever done, all looking at us with mixtures of concern and confusion. "Okay," Catherine said, taking charge. "I don't know what happened between you two, and frankly, I don't want details. But you're our parents. You've been together our entire lives. You've shown us what love looks like, what commitment looks like. So whatever this is, you need to work through it." "It's not that simple," Elena said quietly, echoing my earlier words. "Nothing about love is simple," Michael said from the screen. "But you two taught us that the hard things are worth fighting for. You've been our example," David added. "Every relationship I've had, I've measured against yours. Are you really going to throw that away?" I looked at Elena then, really looked at her. She was staring at her hands, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Despite everything, I wanted to comfort her. The instinct was still there, would probably always be there. "Your mother made a mistake," I said slowly, "a long time ago, and she kept it from me. I just found out, and I'm struggling to process it." "We all make mistakes," Catherine said. "What matters is what we do after." There it was again, the same thing James had said. Maybe they were right. Maybe the 20 years since mattered more than one night of betrayal. Or maybe I was just looking for excuses to forgive her, because the alternative, dismantling our entire life, was too painful to contemplate. "I need more time," I said. "This isn't something that can be fixed in one conversation." "But you're willing to try?" Elena asked, hope creeping into her voice. I looked at her, at our children, at the life we'd built together. 20 years of marriage, 3 incredible kids, a home full of memories, all balanced against one night of betrayal and 20 years of lies. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but maybe." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a promise, but it was a crack in the wall I'd built around myself since finding that diary. Catherine organized the rest of the conversation, setting ground rules. Elena would stay at her parents' for now, but we'd meet for dinner tomorrow, just the two of us, to talk, really talk. Not about the past, but about whether we had a future. After the kids signed off and Catherine left, Elena stood to go. She paused at the door, turning back to look at me. "I know I have no right to ask for anything," she said, "but thank you for not telling them the details, for protecting me even when I don't deserve it." "I didn't do it for you," I said. "I did it for them. They don't need to know the specifics." She nodded. "Still, thank you." After she left, I sat in the empty house, thinking about tomorrow's dinner. I had no idea what I would say, what I wanted, whether forgiveness was even possible. But for the first time since finding the diary, I felt something besides anger and pain. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was just exhaustion, but it was something. I went upstairs to our bedroom for the first time since Elena left. Her perfume still lingered in the air. Her robe hung on the back of the door. 20 years of shared space, shared life. I lay down on my side of the bed, leaving her side empty, but somehow still feeling her presence. Tomorrow, we would talk. We would lay everything on the table, the betrayal, the lies, but also the love, the family, the life we'd built. And then we would decide, was our marriage worth saving? Could trust be rebuilt after such a fundamental breach? Could I look at her without seeing that night in Italy? Could she look at me without seeing the disappointment in my eyes? I didn't have answers, but for the first time, I was willing to ask the questions. Our children were right. What we'd built was worth fighting for. Whether it was worth forgiving for, only time would tell. The diary still sat in my desk drawer, a pink reminder of how secrets could poison even the strongest relationship. But maybe, just maybe, bringing it into the light would let us finally heal. Or maybe it would finish what that night in Italy had started, destroying us 20 years after the fact. Either way, tomorrow, we would begin to find out.